Growing up in a small town just outside a mid-sized city, nothing about my early life felt extraordinary. My father had been in construction for as long as I could remember, and my mother worked part-time at a local grocery store. We were a family that prioritized practicality over luxury. We didn't have much money, but we got by, and they instilled in me that loyalty mattered more than any material possession. My childhood was spent playing street basketball with my friends, wasting hours at the local arcade, and eventually landing a decent job in a warehouse right after high school. It wasn't the job of my dreams, but it paid the bills while I figured out what came next. 3 years ago, I met someone who I thought was my perfect match. Let's call her my girlfriend. We crossed paths at a karaoke bar, where a friend had dragged me out to break my usual weekend routine of staying home and playing video games. I remember butchering some throwback 90s song, but there she was, cheering me on like I was some rock star. She teased me about my awful singing, and we immediately hit it off. After a few drinks, we swapped numbers, and that was the start of everything. It felt effortless. We had late-night texts, quick lunches during my breaks at the warehouse, and random movie dates. I opened up to her about my family, my work struggles, and how I felt stuck in a job with little room for growth. She listened attentively and even shared her own dreams of opening a small business. I found it inspiring to meet someone with ambition, and I was all in. A few months into our relationship, I introduced her to my parents, and they immediately took a liking to her. My mom would say things like, "You found a keeper, treat her right," and of course, I believed every word. For most of our 3 years together, everything seemed perfect. Sure, there were some small red flags. She seemed a bit obsessed with her phone, always checking messages and smirking at whatever popped up. Occasionally, I'd notice her exchanging sly looks with her friends or hearing them crack cryptic jokes. But I brushed it off as harmless inside jokes among her friend group. Even though her friends seemed a little cliquey, none of them were outwardly rude to me. My best friend, who'd known me since childhood, did warn me once, saying, "Dude, her friends are kind of sketchy. Are you sure they're cool?" I didn't see any major problem, so I ignored it. But things started to change about a year ago. She became more secretive, especially with her phone. She'd go outside to take calls whenever I was around, and when I asked her about it, she'd act annoyed, brushing it off with some excuse about just being in a group chat. There was a strange vibe whenever she mentioned how some of her friends were dating guys with money, like she was feeling left behind. I couldn't help but wonder if it was about me, and not earning enough. But whenever I brought it up, she'd dismiss it, saying I was overthinking things. Then, about 6 months ago, she started talking a lot about our future. She kept pushing for us to get more serious, asking questions like, "When are you going to step it up?" Or, "Are we overdue for something bigger?" At first, I thought it was a natural progression for a long-term relationship, but something about her tone felt off. It wasn't about deepening the connection. It was more about the optics of a serious commitment. She'd suggest expensive dinners or weekend getaways to fancy places, which I tried to accommodate within reason, but it stung because I worked a warehouse job. She'd give me disappointed looks, as if it wasn't enough. Once, she said, "I'm not getting any younger, and neither are you," and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was a thinly veiled threat, that if I didn't step up, I'd lose her. I wanted to talk about it, but whenever I pressed her, she'd change the subject. Then, a week ago, things took a dramatic turn. It was my father's birthday, and I had planned a simple family dinner at my parents' house. My mom cooked a hearty meal, and we just wanted a cozy, quiet evening. My girlfriend showed up dressed as if she were heading to a VIP club, looking stunning, but barely speaking to my parents. She was glued to her phone the entire time, and then, just before my father blew out his birthday candles, she got a text and went outside for nearly 10 minutes. It was uncomfortable, to say the least. After dessert, my mother pulled me aside and expressed concern that my girlfriend was distant and possibly disrespectful. At first, I was defensive, but deep down, I knew my mom was right. Something was off, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. That night, I confronted her at my apartment. I tried to stay calm and asked her if everything was okay. What was with all the secrecy around her phone? She clammed up, then got snappy with me, so I backed off to avoid an argument. But my gut was telling me she was hiding something huge. The next day, she texted me saying we needed to talk in person, so I cleared my schedule and prepared myself for whatever was coming. When she arrived, she sat on the couch and said she had something important to confess. I braced myself for a breakup or news that she was moving away, but what she told me was even more shocking. She admitted that our entire relationship had been part of a bet, a game between her and her friends. They had wagered whether she could make a normal, average guy fall head over heels for her. She'd pegged me as an easy target, someone naive, and her friends thought it would be hilarious to reel me in for a short fling. But, as she put it, I turned out to be surprisingly sweet and eager, so she stuck around longer than planned. I was speechless. My mind short-circuited, and for a few moments I couldn't even find the words to respond. When I finally managed to ask if she was serious, she just shrugged, annoyed by my reaction. She said she didn't think it would hurt me so much because, at one point, it had turned into something real. But then, as if flipping a switch, she blamed me for getting too attached. She complained that I hadn't made enough money or treated her to the lavish lifestyle she had expected, and apparently that was my fault too. And to top it off, she said she lost a bit of interest because I hadn't proposed. I was completely floored when I found out the truth about my relationship. For 3 years, I had imagined a future with this person, pouring my heart and soul into it, while she was secretly counting points on some twisted scoreboard. She tried to justify herself, saying she didn't plan for things to go this far, that life was complicated, and that her friends dared her to do it, so here we were. My emotions swung between shock, sadness, and outright fury. I asked her to leave, but she insisted on staying to collect her things and said we should keep talking. But I wasn't having it. I demanded she pack her things immediately. In response, she hurled insults at me, calling me childish and telling me to man up. That was the breaking point. I lost it and started yelling for her to get out. She finally stormed out, slamming the door behind her. In that moment, I felt sick to my core, but there was also a strange sense of relief. The mask was finally off. The next day, my phone was bombarded with messages from her, but I ignored them. I told my parents what had happened, and they were furious on my behalf. My father gave me some timeless advice: never let anyone walk all over you. If they do it once, they'll do it forever. My best friend came over with a six-pack to help me process everything. He admitted he'd heard rumors about her toxic friend group but had no solid proof. He apologized for not telling me sooner, but at least it confirmed my gut feeling. I realized I'd been a sucker for a messed-up scheme. I checked my finances and credit, half expecting something worse, but there was no sign that she'd stolen any money or opened accounts in my name, which was a huge relief. She was manipulative, but thankfully not a full-blown thief. Still, I wanted her to pay in some way, to feel the humiliation she had caused me. After all, she had pranced around with her friends, mocking me behind my back, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. A few days later, my friend told me she and her crew were throwing a birthday party at a fancy lounge downtown. Since my friend knew a bouncer there, I could get in, so I decided to go, not to hide away but to face her and her entire group head-on. I spent the week preparing, gathering old texts and screenshots that showed how she had painted a picture of our future together, how she'd talked about us being an amazing couple. I wanted to prove she was full of lies if she tried to twist the story. When I walked into that lounge with a couple of buddies for moral support, she spotted me from across the room and shot me a death stare. I walked straight up to her, ignoring the dirty looks from her friends. The music was pumping, but I made sure my voice was steady and loud enough for everyone to hear. "So, are you going to tell them how I was just a bet for the last 3 years, or should I do it?" The crowd went silent. I could see her friends go pale, Some of them clearly knew exactly what I was referring to. She hissed at me to be quiet, trying to play it cool, but I didn't back down. I said, "You told me to my face that I was part of a game you lost. You bragged about how easy I was to manipulate. Do you think you can just leave me looking like a fool?" She tried to laugh it off, claiming I was lying because I was pathetic and clingy. That's when I played the audio recording I'd secretly made during our confrontation. We lived in a one-party consent state, so it was perfectly legal. The audio snippet had her admitting she never planned on staying with me, that it was all just a bet. People around us gasped, and I saw some of her friends whispering to each other, stepping back as if they wanted no part in the drama. She lunged at me, screaming for me to turn it off, but I pulled away just as security arrived. I told them I was leaving, but not before I made my final statement loud enough for everyone to hear. Next time you decide to toy with someone's life for a bet, remember how it feels to be exposed. Then I walked out. My heart was pounding, but I can't lie, it felt incredible to see her so rattled and publicly humiliated. One of her friends actually followed me outside, apologized, and said he had no idea it was that deep. I just gave him a half-smile and warned him to be careful who he trusts in that circle. The next day, she flooded my phone with threats, claiming she'd sue me for defamation and that I had no right to record her. She even said I was abusive. That's when I reached out to a lawyer acquaintance, someone my father knew from construction projects. He told me not to worry, that defamation wouldn't stick with her own words as proof, and that the recording was legal since I was part of the conversation. He also said that if she tried claiming abuse, I could counter with a text and call she'd sent me after the breakup. She didn't have a real case. Armed with that knowledge, I texted her one final time. "I have all your threats documented, so back off, or I'll see you in court." Then I blocked her everywhere. Naturally, word of our explosive breakup spread through mutual acquaintances. She tried to paint me as a vengeful jerk, but people saw my receipts and some even reached out to apologize for not warning me about her manipulative behavior sooner. She also tried calling my mother, sobbing about how I'd ruined her reputation. My mom told her never to call again and reminded her that she caused her own downfall by playing games with my life. That was the last time she ever tried contacting my family. I found out she started losing hours at her boutique job because coworkers and customers didn't want to be around her toxic energy. She had alienated a lot of people, and her so-called best friends were now wary of her. It seemed that if you're cold-hearted enough to turn a real relationship into a game, no one feels safe around you. She tried spinning a sob story, claiming I was broke and not ambitious enough, but that didn't change the fact that she admitted to using me as a pawn. Looking back, I'm angry at myself for being so blind, but I'm also proud of how I handled it in the end. It took a bombshell revelation to light a fire under me, and I've been focusing on myself ever since. I've been reconnecting with old friends, exploring better job opportunities, and doing things that make me happy. My father keeps reminding me, "You survived this. Now trust people who truly care." It's been invaluable advice. Sometimes I still get a knot in my stomach remembering how fake our entire relationship was. 3 years is a long time to be someone's clown. But if there's a silver lining, it's that I've learned to set boundaries and defend them. If my story helps anyone see the red flags earlier, then I'll call that a win. Don't ignore your gut. Don't let anyone guilt-trip you into thinking you're inadequate, and never let them reduce your relationship to a sick bet. If someone's trifling enough to play with your heart, hit back with the truth and let them scramble to handle the consequences of their own twisted games. That's how my 3-year relationship went up in flames. She admitted she never cared, turned me into her personal project, and almost got away with it. But now, she's left with a trash reputation while I'm free from the toxic crap. I blocked her everywhere, and trust me, I'm not losing any sleep over it. If she tries anything else, I've got the legal backup to shut it down fast. My advice to anyone dealing with manipulative partners is to stand your ground. You're not to blame for someone else's twisted games. I may have fallen for her lies, but in the end, I made sure she paid the price. And that's one hell of a relief. Here's to moving on with my life, stronger and smarter than before.